Hi everybody, welcome back. This is part 3. In this part we're going to build the legs, and then what we'll do is move on to the arms later on down the track. Hopefully this will be a pretty quick one. It's going to be similar to the previous video, and we've only got about 5 joints to build for this, 5 or 6, so it should be pretty quick. So let's begin. What we're going to do is we're going to jump into the front view first, okay, and just like last time, what we're going to do is create a new joint. So I'm going to click on the joint tool, create joints, and what I want to do is click a joint just where the leg, which I can kind of faintly see here, just where the leg intersects with the underside of the can and this dome. We can see this dome edge just here. So I'm going to click just there in the middle of the leg where it hits that dome. Now, here's a problem. In the last video, I turned snap to points on and I forgot to turn it off. And so when I've clicked, it's actually jumped and placed my joint on the front of the can. Okay, so what I'm going to do is undo that by hitting Z on the keyboard. I'm going to turn off my point snap, and then I'm going to try that again. So I'm going to just pop that there, like that. And now here's a problem. Because I created a joint before in this view, it's kind of now worked out where the position of that was, and it's kind of defaulted that to being the the 0 position. So I do need to make sure that I fix that up. Okay, but that's kind of the next step anyway. So we create the first joint in the front view. Now what I'm going to do, so that I can create the joints and they're lining up with the model, I now need to switch over to my side view. So if you're in your front view like this still, and the tool is still active, tap your spacebar, move your cursor over to the side view, tap your spacebar again. And if you've got the same problem that I do, where the joint jumped forwards because of that point snap, middle mouse click your, or sorry, I should say click the middle mouse button, that's what I'm trying to say. That'll get these manipulate handles up, and then just use the middle mouse button to move them back. Now, you can see here, I don't have my skeleton or my joint x-ray on, so I'm going to click that button just there. Note that the joint tool is still switched on. And I'm also going to click on my wireframe on shaded, just here. And I'm also going to click the X-ray just to make it a little lighter or more see-through. Okay, so what I want to do is move this back and forwards until I get the joint sort of in the middle of the leg. And I can see the little stick on the stick leg there. So it's sort of in the middle of that width of leg. Okay, you can see up here, this is the pelvis joint. It doesn't need to line up with that. The pelvis joint will be lined up with the middle of the can. Okay, our leg is a little bit back from that. All right, so that's joint 1. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pop down and use the left mouse button and create the knee. Now what I'm going to do is left click and hold the mouse button down. So I'm just going to hold the left mouse button down, and then I can click, I can just drag and position the knee. Now what I'm going to do is place the knee just in between the front of the knee and the middle of the knee. I'm just going to pop it about just here. Okay. Now with this model, because the knee is already pre-bent, I could just pop it in the middle and that would work okay. It's a very skinny leg as well. So anywhere sort of, you know, in this area would be fine. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. If your character model has a straight leg, you would need to put the joint a little bit in front of the middle of the knee. Okay, you know, so if the leg was straight, I would place the joint about here instead of in the middle. Okay. Once again, it doesn't have to be exact. You can see there that it's not perfectly lined up with that edge. That doesn't matter. Okay, next one. Next one's going to be the ankle, and I want the ankle basically to be right here in the middle of this edge here, right? Just here in the middle. That's going to optimize the position of the bending. Okay. The next one is going to be down here at the ball of the foot. So these three edges here act like a hinge so the foot can bend. And the bend is going to occur primarily along this middle edge. So what I want to do is put my joint at the bottom of the foot along that edge. So just down in here. And then I'm going to place another one just at the tip of the toe, just inside the toe. I don't want it out here. I want it just inside the geometry, about here, like this. Now you can adjust the radii of your joints. That's how big the joints are. So, you know, for instance, if I grab this and I dial it down, you can actually adjust sort of how big it is. Okay. I tend to make the ones, you know, if I've got a very skinny character like this, I'll actually reduce the joint radius, but I can do that as I'm fixing this up. Okay, so that's basically the leg joints. So as with the spine, what we now need to do is kind of position them, just make sure that they're in a nice spot. We need to rename them, and we also need to orient them. Now what you can do is add one extra joint out in front of the toe, as we've spoken about in previous videos. You can use the middle mouse button to kind of readjust it. It just needs to be out in front of the toe somewhere. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just adjust the position. So turn the tool off, select your hip joint like this, and use the move tool just to adjust the position if you need to. Now it's really important at this point to mention, do not rotate the joints to position them. Only use the move tool to drag them around. Okay. The reason for that is if you rotate the joints to position them, it will cause your rotations to end up on random numbers, and that makes it harder to rig your character and return it back to its original pose. What we want to do is, it doesn't matter if there's translate numbers, but the rotates need to remain at 0. So when you're positioning your object, your joints, only use the move tool. Okay. Once again, start from the hip and work your way down to the toe. Just zoom in. Now you can use the up and down keys on the keyboard as well. So you can use up and down to go up and down the joint chain, if that makes it quicker for you to select. So just make sure that those are in there. Now with the bottom of the foot, what I like to do is I like to switch on point snap just here and drag this down so it's level with the bottom of the foot, and then just go side to side until it's lined up with that edge. And then with the toe, just go up and down so it's level with the bottom of the foot. It's probably not going to matter side to side, okay, forwards, backwards, because it's kind of not really having to line up with a specific part of the foot. As long as it's sort of just in the front there, that'll be fine. Okay, and this one here, you know, we can just go sort of up and down and just adjust it to the level of the bottom of the foot. Okay, let's go back up to the hip and let's start naming them. So I'm going to hold shift, expand this out, and I'm going to call this hip space JNT. Let's have a quick look here. We do have to indicate that this is the left. This is going to be the left leg. Sometimes what I do is I put in hip left joint, and sometimes I put in hip joint left. I'm going to do left joint. Okay, so LFT. So it's hip space LFT in capitals space JNT in capitals. Okay, hit enter, and you can see that it puts underscores in. Okay, so each of these names that we're going to put in is going to have left and joint. So if you double click here and then highlight like we did last time, highlight joint and left, and copy that, Command or Control C. Okay, go down to the next one. This one is knee. So I'm going to type in knee and then Control or Command V. So we get knee left joint. So it's the knee, it's on the left leg, and it's a joint. Next one's going to be ankle, left joint. Next one is going to be foot, left joint. You could also call that ball. That's sort of the ball of your foot. So that would also be an appropriate term. And this one's going to be toe. Once again, the extra joint at the end is going to get removed. It's really just there just in case the toe joint goes a bit sideways. Okay, now what we're going to do is tap the spacebar and take a look at the front view and just zoom out, and we're going to just make sure that the joints are lined up down the middle of the leg like this. Because we placed the hip in the front view originally, okay, like this, so we were in here, we clicked this joint and then we switched to the side view over here. All of the additional joints that we clicked used this location as sort of its center point for how far left or right it was going to place them. It's going to place them directly below, even though we're clicking in the side view. So that's why I did the first joint here and then did the others here. So that way it would automatically line them up with the hip, but I could place them forwards or backwards to follow the shape of the leg. Okay, so that way our leg is in the right spot on the left hand side of the body. Okay, so we've got them named, we've got them positioned. Now what we want to do is orient them. So what we're going to do, once again, just like last time, I'll do this in the perspective view. We can see here that the joints kind of flip forwards and backwards, and that's because we've got a bend in the knee. Okay, so this one here, the y-axis is forward, this one it's backwards, this one it's up, okay, which is technically forwards. This one is up, which is forwards, up, forwards, and up, forwards. Okay, but you can see here, these ones, the x-axis, the red, is pointing from joint to joint as usual, except for the end one, which is sideways, and that's what I was talking about earlier. The last one you put in is usually sideways. All right, let's orient these joints. Same settings as last time. So we go to skeleton, and I can just hit orient joint. I don't need to go into the settings. There it is there, orient joint. Cool. Okay, so now what we've got is red. Red is along the joint, and the y-axis should go forwards or up if this is working. So let's take a look. So we've got X and forward. We've got X and forward. That one's technically X and forward. That's X and forward. Now this one here is flipped upside down, which will probably cause an issue. So we need to take a bit of a look at that one. Now keep in mind as well, this may not have happened to you. This may be purely what's happening to my my version of this. Yours might be doing something entirely different in this case. It's not a massive issue because this joint isn't necessarily really going to rotate at all. This joint's only here to move the toe geometry up and down, but it won't really be controlled by the rotation of the joint, unlike some of these other ones. So that's probably going to be okay as it is. I might just, I can probably leave that. So I'm just going to delete the end joint and pray for the best. Yeah, as I said, I don't think that's going to matter. If I wanted to fix that, what I could do is manually adjust the local rotation axis. So to show you that process, just so you get an understanding of it, if you go to skeleton orient joint, open that up. So like I did earlier, if I hit toggle local rotation axes, if I select this joint here and do the same thing so I can see what I need to copy, go back onto this one, right? What I can do is basically flip this. It needs to go 90 degrees this way, so that Z is pointing out this side and Y is up. So what I can do is switch over to component mode just here. Right, and what I want to do is grab, whoops, not that one, might be handles, nope, I always forget which one of these it is, might actually be just that by itself. Maybe not. Bear with me for a second. I think what I'm going to do is switch off the geometry. That way it's not going to keep trying to select the polygons all the time. Nope. It's not that one. Oh, it could be that. Nope. Okay. I've discovered a bit of a bug with this. It's not allowing me to select the local rotation axis properly, which is this little thing here. It did it just before, but it seems to be playing up where it doesn't really quite matter where I click it, it's not selecting. Normally what would happen is you'd click on this thing and it would go yellow, and then you could rotate it around. And I did get it to actually work just before. If I undo, I might be able to get it to, yep, there we go. I've clicked on this thing about 50 times and it only ever selected once, okay? So just be mindful. Maya's selection system's a bit of a pain. It could also be that the snap to points might have been playing around with it as well. Okay, so I'm going to rotate this around. If I hold down the J key, I can snap this to 15-degree increments. So I'm just going to flip it around like that. That's actually a little too far. Let me go back one. There we go. Now this might not always register that it's looking the right way, but you can see there that the axes are now in the right spot. So then if I deselect all of that, for some reason it keeps jumping an extra 15 degrees, which is not helping at all. Sometimes what I'm finding is going on here is that you can see here that sometimes the it's actually more like the screen is not actually registering properly. Let me just make this a bit bigger so you can see it. So basically what I want to do is get the Y to be up and the Z axis to be over here. Now if I just click and drag it, you can see that works fine. Right? That works okay. But in order to get it to go, even when I undo, it doesn't always, I've got to hit undo a couple of times to get it to actually undo. It's because of the way that Maya doesn't seem to update its displays very well. I think that's what's kind of causing it. So in my tool settings, what I'm trying to do here is go to step snap 15 degrees, right? So if I switch that on, right, to relative, and then I drag this, see how it clicks? But here's the problem. When it clicks, it doesn't always actually update the display so that the items are actually in the right spot. Now, the joint lines have gone around all the way, so I know that the joint itself is, but the axes don't seem to be displaying that properly. When I turn off and then I deselect, it seems to then fix the display. So you might find if you're playing around with joint orientations like this, where you're trying to fix them manually, you might find that there's problems with the display. So just bear that in mind. You might need to ask for assistance with that. If you ever need to do it. As I said, earlier on, you may not need to do that yourself. I needed to, but it might not happen the same way on yours. Okay, so with that bit of a crisis over and done with, I'm just going to switch back to my normal object mode. There we go. And I also need to switch off the axes, the axis visibility there. So I'm going to go to display, transform display, local rotation axes, and just switch that off. There we go. Okay. So you can see quite often with 3D, whether it's modeling, rigging, texturing, animation, quite often you'll run into little kind of vague things with the software because the software is not working quite the way that it normally would or the way you'd expect. And so there's a lot of problem solving involved. In order to be a functional, 3D, artist or whatever term you want to use, you need to be willing and sort of have the ability to kind of work through those problems logically. And obviously a lot of that comes through experience, but also sometimes you might need to jump online and take a look at some research in order to problem solve. Okay, so we have our leg. Let me just open the outline again. So we've got the leg and it's all kind of named. What we're going to do now is we're going to mirror this so we get both legs, and then we'll end this video. Okay, so mirroring. What we're going to do is we're going to pop up to the skeleton menu again, and we've got mirror joints just here. This is a pretty cool tool. We're going to pop into the options. Only a few settings, and what we need to do is first of all work out which axis we're going to mirror across. Okay. Now, normally, what we want to do is, unfortunately, some settings, instead of just saying like plus y plus minus y or plus x minus x, so you can kind of tell it which direction to go in. Sometimes mirror functions within Maya will designate a mirror plane, a two-dimensional mirror plane, which it will then reflect the object in. And that's what's happening here. So I need to go along the negative x direction, which I can see here from this little axis widget. Okay, I need to go from here across to here. So that's the x direction. In order to get it to go across the x direction, I would have to have a mirror here that's vertical, but also forwards, backwards. Okay, in the horizontal direction, this way, right? So that would be a y direction and a z direction. So if I look for the YZ option just here, that's going to be the one that I want. In essence, if you know you need to mirror from one side of the x-axis to the other side of the x-axis, you look for the option that doesn't have an x in the name. Okay? That's sort of how it works. That's an easier way to remember it. If you are going to mirror along a particular direction, you need to use the option that doesn't have that direction in the name. Okay? Now, we need to mirror function the behavior. Okay? For mirror function, it needs to be the behavior, not the orientation. This is going to be the difference between a windscreen wiper effect if you select both hips and you rotate them, or having them kind of do star jumps. Okay, I'm going to show you what this is going to do once we've done it. Okay, just so you get an idea of what we're talking about. Replacement names for duplicated joints. This is going to be really important. At the moment, we've named our joints nicely, hip left joint and so on. What we need to do, because we're going to end up with a right leg, we can't have the LFT, the left tag, in there. What we want to do is replace LFT with RGT for right. So we've got left leg, right leg. Okay, now keep in mind this is the character's left leg, even though it's on the right hand side of our screen. So what I'm going to do is search for LFT, and it's written exactly the same as it is in the name in capitals, and I'm going to replace it with RGT. Right. Okay, so then what we do is hit mirror. Boop, and there's our second leg. And you can see here, this one is called hip right joint. Shift click to expand out and just double check them. So that looks really cool. That's all done. Now, let's talk a little bit about that behavior. We had the function, the orientation function, had two options, behavior and orientation. What this is doing is it's mirroring the way that the legs function. So if I select both hips like this and use the rotate tool, when it's set to behavior, it will mirror the behavior of the leg, right? So if I rotate one leg out, it's going to rotate the other leg the other way. Obviously, they're both selected, right? This is what we want, okay? This is how we want it to function. If you set it to the other option, which is orientation, when I rotate this leg out this way, this leg would actually go this way instead of coming out this way. So it would act like windscreen wipers, where they're going sort of back and forwards at the same time in the same direction, rather than doing little star jumps. So it's important to use the behavior option with the mirror joints. The same thing needs to be done for the arms as well. Okay, now I've just noticed I've left my I've got some clicking going on the rotation there, and that's because normally this transform constraint, step snap is switched on just here. I'm going to turn that off. That was from when I was trying to fix the toe earlier on. Okay, so yeah, don't forget, turn off options that you don't need to use all the time when you finish using them. Okay, there's our legs. Now, what we're going to do down the track is we're going to select these two legs, and what we're going to do is parent them onto the pelvis. We might not do that just yet, just in case we need to make any adjustments to any of those. Saves us having to disconnect them all again. But you can see at the moment what we're getting is something along these lines. Okay, so don't forget, save your file. So we're going to go File, Save Scene As, and I'm going to save this as 2. And yeah, so in the next one we're going to build the arms and the hands. Similar process to the legs, but obviously with more fingers. So I'll see you then.